Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I welcome you to the last lecture for the series of lectures on advanced computer architecture. Today, we will be reviewing whatever we have been discussing in our earlier lectures. You have noticed that we organized this course into 9 modules. Here, the first module described the introduction and the quantitative principles of analysis. The second module dealt with the instruction set architecture, and then it was followed in the third module by the computer hardware design. Then we discussed in module 4 and 5 the instruction level parallelism for dynamic approach and static approach. And then we talked about the design of the memory hierarchy system, multiprocessing, and input-output systems. And in the last module, we discussed the networks and clusters. In the first module, we started the introduction to this course by distinguishing between the computer organization and computer architecture. Here we said that the computer architecture basically refers to those attributes of the computer which are visible to the programmer and to the compiler writer. These attributes include the instruction set, the memory and memory addressing techniques, and I/O mechanism, etc. Whereas the computer organization refers to how the features of computer are implemented and different building blocks are organized. For example, the organization deals with the techniques for generating the control signals. For example, whether the control signals are being generated using the principles of finite state machine or microprogramming. In fact, the architecture of the members of processors of a family is always the same, whereas its organization may differ from one model to another model. For example, the instruction set is compatible for Pentium Pro 1 or Pentium 6, but the organization of different models, they are different from each other. Then, in fact, we also discussed the developments of computers, both from its academic point of view and the commercial point of view. We noticed that academically, the development of modern computers was initiated in 1944 when John von Neumann introduced the concept of stored program, and this computer is basically referred to as the electronic discrete variable automatic computer, whereas commercially the first machine was built by Accurate Computer Corporation in 1949, and the further developments in electronics technology, they introduced the microprocessor in 1971 when the first microprocessor series was introduced by Intel, named as 4000 series. It was a 4-bit microprocessor. The developments in electronics was so rapid that in 1998, more than 350 million processors with different types of instruction set architecture were available in the market. And this number is increasing according to the Moore's law. And in 2007 or 8, this number has reached to billions of microprocessors available in the market. Then we talked about the computer generations, where the computer generations are defined as generation 1, generation 2, or so on, based on the type of the electronic devices which are used and the developments of computers and their final implementation. The voyage is very long, but it started from the vacuum tube and now it has entered into the development techniques for very large-scale integrated circuits and ultra-large-scale integrated circuits. However, we then talked about the computer architecture and its different attributes from 4 different perspectives. These perspectives were the processor design, memory hierarchy, input, output, and storage systems, and multiprocessors and their use in networks. Then in the first module, we also discussed the quantitative principles for the performance measurement of the computer, both from the software as well as the hardware point of view. In this respect, we discussed what is the price performance design, what is the CPU performance matrix, and what are the CPU benchmark suits available to analyze the performance of a microprocessor-based system. While talking about the price performance design features, we noticed that it is a very complex issue. At one extreme, the high-performance computer designers may be interested in the importance of the performance as compared to the cost of the system. Whereas at the other end, the low-cost system designer may sacrifice the performance and he may always be interested in producing a low-cost system. The price performance design basically lies in between these 2 extreme values, that is high performance without considering the cost, or the low cost with relatively compromised performance. Then we talked about the CPU benchmark suits. These benchmark suits are used in order to compare the performance, which is compared by evaluating the execution time for a particular type of load running onto the standard machine and the machine whose performance is to be measured. In practice, users want to know, without running their actual program, that how well the machine will perform for their particular work. And this is indeed accomplished by evaluating the performance of a machine using a set of benchmarks. Benchmarks are in fact the programs which are specifically chosen to measure the performance. Presently, there are 5 levels of programs which are used as benchmarks. As we discussed at the end of the first module, that these programs are usually the real application where a particular specific application, say in MATLAB or in a high-level programming language, is developed and used as a benchmark, or it may be a modified application or a kernel which is a small key piece extracted from the real program, or it may be a toy benchmark which is a very, very small code which is used to measure the performance, or it may be a synthetic benchmark, which means it is an artificially created program and it is not a real-time program. In the last lecture for Module 1, we talked about the quantitative principles of performance measurement. We noticed that quantitatively, the performance of a system can be enhanced by speed up of a fraction of system, not the whole system, rather a small fraction of system, and this small fraction is selected based on the concept of the common case first. In this respect, the Amdahl's law provides us the basis of the measure of the performance enhancement, which defines the speed up due to enhancement that accelerates the fraction of a program. It is defined as the ratio of the execution time without enhancement to the execution time with enhancement. And as we know that the performance is reciprocal of the execution time, therefore the speed up due to enhancement in a fraction is the ratio of performance with enhancement to the performance without enhancement. Now, after this, we started with the Module 2, which was developed to introduce to you the concepts of instruction set architecture. We know this thing that there are 3 pillars of computer architecture, and these 3 pillars are the hardware, the instruction set, and the software. The hardware facilitates to run the software, whereas the instruction set acts as the interface between the hardware and the software. Now, while talking about the instruction set architecture, the focus of our discussion have been the taxonomy of instruction set architecture, the types of operands and operations, the memory addressing modes. While talking about the taxonomy, we noticed that the taxonomy is defined as a stack architecture, the accumulator architecture, and general purpose register architecture. The general purpose register architecture is further classified as the register memory or register register. Register register, in fact, is a load store architecture, whereas there is a possibility of having the memory architecture, but it is quite complex to develop. Therefore, this technique is almost obsolete at the moment. The operands and operations are of type integer, floating point, and characters, whereas the operand sizes are defined in terms of the half word, one word, and double word. The operations are classified as the arithmetic, logic, data transfer, control, and support operations. While talking about the addressing modes, we discussed the immediate mode, register direct or absolute mode, and indirect mode. However, we also studied further classification of indirect addressing mode, which is register addressing, indexed addressing, and relative addressing. Whereas the special addressing modes were discussed for the DSP processor instruction set architecture, and these special addressing modes were the auto increment, auto decrement, and scaled. The control instruction addressing modes are the branch, jump, and procedure call or return. Then in the third module, we discussed the computer hardware design in detail. Here we studied the basic building blocks of a computer, the subsystems of the central processing unit, that is the data path and the control section. We also studied the different steps which can be used to design the processor and the design parameters which must be taken into consideration while designing the hardware of a processor. Then we discussed the complete hardware design process, the timing signal generation, and the bus architecture, which included the unibus structures, 2-bus structure, and 3-bus structures. Then we also looked into the design of the data path from the point of view of the single cycle data path, multi-cycle data path, and pipeline architecture. While talking about the data path implementations, we noticed that a data path consists of registers, internal buses, the arithmetic and logic unit, and shifter circuits. In this design, each register in the register file has the capabilities or the control signals for load and retrieve information from the registers. A set of tri-state buffers are used between the output and the bus, and the read control lines are used to enable the buffers and place the register on the bus. Then, while talking about the single cycle and multiple cycle data path, we noticed that in single cycle implementation, the cycle time is set to accommodate the longest instruction. For example, the longest instruction is the load instruction, where it has to perform the memory read as well as the register write operation. Whereas in the multiple cycle implementation, the cycle time is set to accomplish the longest step, not the longest instruction, rather the longest step of the instruction. For example, the longest step is the memory read or memory write operation. So the cycle length is set for multi-cycle operations equal to memory read or memory write. So consequently, it shows that the cycle time for the single cycle implementation is 4 to 5 times longer than the cycle time for multi-cycle implementation. Then we discussed the pipeline data path. Here we noticed that the basic concept of the pipeline data path is that any operation is completed in multiple steps using distinct resources. This means that for different types of operations, different steps are executed simultaneously in the pipeline. Therefore, it utilizes the capabilities of the data path by starting the next instruction while it is working onto the current one. The pipeline data path may encounter three types of hazards, namely the structural hazard, the data hazards, and the control hazards. Hazards usually occur due to the dependency. That is, anything which is needed at one time, it depends upon its availability. For example, the structural hazard occurs when same resource is accessed by more than one instructions. For example, there is, say, a one memory port, and suppose it has been accessed by more than one instructions. So this type of hazards can be removed by using either multiple resources or by using the stall. However, we always try to reduce the number of stalls because the stalls degrade the pipeline performance. The data hazards occur when attempt is made to read some invalid data. And again, the data hazard can be removed by using either the stall operations or by using a technique known as the forwarding technique. The third type of hazard, that is the control hazard, it occurs when an attempt is made to branch prior to the evaluation of the condition, because we know that branch always requires the evaluation of a particular condition, and branch takes place only if the condition is met. But if the branch circuit performs the operation first and the condition is evaluated afterward, then this gives rise to the state of control hazard. There are different ways to control the control hazards, and these methods are the stall, predict whether the branch is taken, and the other one is predict the branch not taken. If we predict branch not taken, then it executes the successor instruction in sequence. And the fourth technique may be that it is a delayed branch, which means that the defined branch to take place after a particular instruction. Then after this, we started with the fourth module, which is the instruction level parallelism. And basically this module deals with the instruction level parallelism, which is to be exploited by using hardware techniques. In fact, the simple pipeline facilitates in-order execution, whereas in order to enhance the performance of the pipeline, we always want to begin the execution as soon as the data operand are available. This means that it may give rise to the out-of-order execution. However, this out-of-order execution may introduce some other dependencies which may result in the hazards known as write after read and write after write. The instruction level parallelism can be achieved by either using some hardware or by using the software techniques. The hardware techniques are known as the dynamic approach, whereas the software techniques are known as the static approach. The dynamic scheduling is accomplished by dividing the instruction decode stage into two parts. These two parts are the issue and read. which means that issue the instruction in order and read the operand out of order. The structural and data dependencies are checked at the instruction decode stage. So this means that at the instruction decode stage, first we check the structural or the data dependencies, and accordingly we issue the instructions in order. This indeed facilitates out of order execution, which results in out of order completion. Following this basic introduction and getting introduced with different types of hazards, then we discussed two basic techniques to overcome this hazard problem, and these two techniques were the scoreboarding and use of the Tomasello's algorithm. So these are indeed the basic concepts of scheduling in integer point and floating point data paths respectively. That is, the scoreboard technique is used for integer data, and the Tomasello's algorithm is used for the floating point algorithm used in the data path. The structural implementations which employ these concepts, they facilitate out of order execution to minimize the data dependencies. Hence, it avoids the data hazards without stalls. The Tomasello's approach for the IBM 360 system is used to achieve the high performance without any special compiler. However, here the control and buffers are distributed with the functional units. The registers in the instructions are replaced by values or pointers to the reservation stations. That is, the pointers to the reservation stations. And unlike the scoreboard, Tomasello can have multiple loads outstanding lying over there, and then later on it commits them. Now, in this particular module, we also discussed the branch prediction technique, which is used to reduce the number of stalls due to the control hazards. The concept of multiple instructions issue was discussed in details in these lectures, and this concept is basically used to reduce the clock cycles per instruction to less than 1. Thus, it allows the performance of the processor to enhance, and because in this particular case, in one clock cycle, more than one instructions can be issued. Furthermore, we also studied the extension to the Tomasello structure by including hardware-based speculation. Now, this modification, in fact, allows to speculate that the branch is correctly predicted or not. Therefore, if it finds that the branch is correctly predicted, then it executes them out of order, but it commits it in order, having confirmed that the speculation is correct and no exception exists. The major hardware-based techniques which we studied throughout this course are the forwarding and bypass technique, the delayed branching and branch scheduling, and the basic dynamic scheduling technique. The dynamic scheduling technique basically deals with the data hazards, and it reduces the stalls due to data hazards. The other techniques which we studied over here were the dynamic scheduling with renaming and dynamic branch prediction, speculation, and multiple instructions issue per cycle. We discussed the case of multiple instructions issue per cycle in detail in this course. Then in the fifth module, we discussed the multiple instruction issue case in further detail related to the high performance processor. Here we discussed the superscalar processors and very long instruction word processors. The superscalar processors indeed exploit instruction level parallelism using static as well as dynamic scheduling approaches, whereas the very long instruction word processor exploits the instruction level parallelism only using the static scheduling. The major software scheduling technique under discussion to reduce the data and control stalls has been the basic compiler scheduling, loop unrolling, compiler dependence, trace scheduling, and compiler speculation. With this much discussion onto the dynamic scheduling techniques in Module 4 and static scheduling techniques in Module 5, we started with the Module 6, which deals with the memory hierarchy system. Here we discussed how the gap between the speed of a processor and the speed of the storage devices can be filled. We studied that in order to obtain high-speed storage at the cheapest cost per byte, different types of memories are organized in an hierarchical form, and this organization is basically based on the concept of caching and the principle of locality. The principle of locality states that in order to obtain data or instruction of a program, the processor accesses at any instant of time a relatively small portion of the address space of the fastest memory, and the fastest memory is placed closest to the processor. In fact, there are two different types of localities which we always take into consideration, and these are the temporal locality, which is in fact the locality in time, and the spatial locality, which is the locality in space. Having understood the concept of locality, then we talked about the concepts of caching. The concept of caching states that the small, fastest, and most expensive storage be used as the staging area or the temporary storage place to store the frequently used subset of instructions or data, and to avoid having to go to the main memory every time a data or instruction is to be read or data is to be written. The performance of cache is limited by different types of penalties. These penalties are in terms of how much time it takes to access the data from the memory which is closest to the processor, and if it is not available in the memory closest to the processor, then how much time is required to retrieve this information from the main memory. Then we talked about 4 options to improve the cache performance. These options were the miss penalty, the miss rate, the miss penalty and miss rate via parallelism, that is using both the miss penalty as well as the miss rate to improve the cache performance, and both are to be used in parallel. And the fourth technique was to reduce the time to hit in the cache. So this means we studied how to reduce the time corresponding to the miss penalty or miss rate or time to hit the cache. Now, then we talked about the virtual memory system, where the virtual memory system, in fact, is used to use the main memory and the secondary storage devices exactly in the same manner as the cache is used along with the main memory. In this case, basically, the main memory acts as a cache for the secondary storage. So, in this respect, we also studied the use of the translation look-aside buffer to reduce the overall access time, and then different techniques were studied to write back the information into the secondary storage when some information is to be replaced. We also studied here different techniques to write the information back to the main memory. It is either the write through or write back technique, which we studied in detail. Having detailed study of the memory hierarchy system, we started with the 7th module to discuss the multiprocessing. This was indeed a series containing 4 lectures. In this series of 4 lectures, we studied how improvements in computer performance can be accomplished by using parallel processing architecture. The parallel architecture is, in fact, a collection of processing elements where these elements cooperate with each other and communicate to solve a larger problem, but it is solved onto multiple processors very fast. Here, in this case, we studied 4 different categories of parallel processing architectures. These 4 categories are the single instruction, single data. This is indeed a uniprocessing technique, whereas the other 3 are the multiprocessing techniques, which are the single instruction, multiple data, multiple instruction, single data stream, and multiple instruction, multiple data stream. The multiple instruction, multiple data stream is indeed the complete multiprocessing system. This system can be classified as the central shared memory architecture and distributed memory architecture. In the central shared memory system, basically there is only one memory unit, and this memory is shared amongst multiple processors. Whereas the distributed memory architecture is one where memory is distributed throughout the processor. Every processor has got some memory associated with it. Here we also looked into the framework which can be used to study the performance of parallel architecture. This framework is, in fact, a two-layer representation, that is, a programming layer and a communication layer. Then we talked about the sharing of caches for multiprocessors in the symmetrically shared architecture in detail. Here we studied the cache coherence problem, which usually occurs when the memory is distributed and there must be a coherency which has to be established between different memories. At this stage, we studied two different methods to look into the coherency problem, and these two methods are the write invalidation and write broadcast schemes. These two schemes are used to resolve the coherency problem. We also discussed over here the finite state machine structure for the implementation of some algorithms. The most commonly used algorithm is the snooping algorithm. Having got detailed discussion onto the multiprocessing in Module 7, we discussed the input-output systems in Module 8. While talking about the input-output system, we said that the overall performance of a computer is measured by its throughput, and throughput is always influenced by the system which is external to the processor as well as the performance of the processor. The effect of neglecting the input-output onto the overall performance of a computer is very significant, and as we studied in the beginning, by the Amdahl's law, which states that if a performance enhancement is made in a small fraction of the system, it may give us an overall performance improvement. So this shows that if we make some arrangement in the enhancement of the performance of the I/O systems which are connected to the processor, we can improve the overall performance of the system. So in this respect, we discussed different trends in I/O interfacing, and these trends are the networks, the channels, and backplanes. The networks offer message-based narrow pathways for distributed processors over a very, very long distance, whereas the backplanes offer memory-mapped wider pathways for centralized processing over short distance, and the channels are implemented by using buses. The buses are classified into two major categories, that is the I/O bus and CPU memory bus. The channels which are implemented using I/O buses and backplanes are implemented by using CPU memory bus. We discussed the bus transition protocols in detail, which specify the sequence of events and the time requirement in transferring information as synchronous or asynchronous communication. We also studied the arbitration protocols, that is, the protocols to reserve the bus by a device that wishes to communicate when multiple devices need the bus. Here we notice that the bus arbitration schemes usually try to balance the two factors, that is the bus priority and fairness. We also studied in the I/O systems 3 bus arbitration schemes, that is the daisy chain arbitration, centralized parallel arbitration, and distributed arbitration. Having discussed the input-output systems, then we started with the networks and clusters in the 9th module. In this module, we studied the formation of a generic interconnection network that comprises the computer nodes, the hardware and software interface, the links to interconnection networks, and communication subnets. The interconnections are designed as the local area networks, the wide area networks, and the system area networks, which is also sometimes called the storage area network, SAN. While talking about the interconnect model, software, and protocols, we studied that the interconnect communication models show that two machines are connected via two unidirectional wires with a first in, first out at the end to hold the data. Whereas the communication software separates the headers and trailers from the message, and it identifies the request, reply, their acknowledgements, and error checking codes. And the communication protocol suggests the sequence of steps for reliable communication. Here we classified the distributed switch interconnect as the fully and partially connected symmetric and asymmetric interconnects. Then we discussed the linear array, ring, two-dimensional mesh, and hypercube topologies and their performance measures. We also discussed internetworking, that is the connection of two or more interconnect networks to communicate reliably and efficiently. Internetworking relies on the communication standards composed of hierarchy of layers. The Internet communication protocol families facilitate applications to work with any interconnection. Now, with this much discussion, we have in fact summarized all what we have already studied in the previous 44 lectures. Now, as today it is the last lecture, therefore, at the end, I say you Allah Hafiz and wish you success in your examinations. Thank you.